He ripped her dress, right there in the middle of a $2 million Chicago wedding, beneath crystal chandeliers and in front of 200 guests dressed like royalty. Mason Caldwell, billionaire, tech darling, America's Midwest golden boy, reached out, grabbed the fabric covering his pregnant ex-wife's belly, and tore it open like she was trash he'd forgotten to take out. Gasps echoed through the Drake Hotel's grand ballroom. Phones raised. Guests frozen in horror. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Even the champagne seemed to stop sparkling. He thought he had destroyed her. He thought that exposing her literally and publicly would prove he had won, that she was nothing, that she never mattered. But what Ariel Johnson did next didn't just stop his perfect wedding. It ended his perfect image. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another unbelievable story. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Chicago, New York, Dallas, Toronto. We love seeing our community all over the world. Now, let's go back to where this nightmare began. 6 months before that dress tour, Ariel Johnson had been a promising marketing strategist in Chicago, planning her future with the man she thought she'd grow old with. Now she stood in a borrowed uniform that barely fit over her 4-month pregnant belly, serving champagne to people who wouldn't notice her if she caught fire. She never imagined her life would shrink so quickly. From planning campaigns for Fortune 500 clients to counting quarters at a laundromat in the South Side. From sleeping in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan to a tiny studio in Bronzeville where the heater rattled like it was begging to retire, and her downstairs neighbor's burnt cooking seeped through the vents every single night. Mason Caldwell had made sure of that. The same Mason who once lived off frozen burritos and coded apps at 3 a.m. while she worked overtime so he could chase his dream. The same Mason she fed, encouraged, and believed in more fiercely than he believed in himself. The same Mason who, the moment she told him she was pregnant, looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, rather than the woman he'd promised forever. He didn't see a family. He saw a liability, a threat to his brand, an inconvenience to bigger deals and better opportunities, so he erased her, filed for divorce in record speed, wiped her from his life like she never existed. And now, 6 months later, here she was, invisible among Chicago's elite, serving appetizers at his wedding to Harper Sinclair, a beautiful socialite who had no idea what kind of man she was marrying. Ariel had taken this job because she needed the $450 cash, because rent was overdue, because her savings were gone, and every job application ended the same way. Sorry, we've moved on with candidates whose availability better suits our needs. She hadn't known whose wedding it was until she arrived, but even then, she'd stayed, because she needed to survive. She just didn't know that survival would require something far more dangerous than silence. The moment froze like a photograph that would haunt the internet forever. Mason's hand still gripped the torn fabric of Ariel's red server uniform, the cheap polyester splitting easily under his fingers. The sound had been sickening, a sharp ripe that cut through the elegant music and polite conversation like a knife through silk. Ariel's pregnant belly was exposed, not fully, but enough that the white silk camisole beneath showed, enough that her condition was undeniable, enough that every single person in that ballroom understood exactly what they were witnessing. 200 guests, 200 phones, 200 witnesses to a cruelty so calculated it made the air itself feel toxic. "This," Mason announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom with the confidence of a man who'd given TED Talks and keynote speeches, "is what happens when people refuse to know their place." His face was flushed, not with shame, but with something darker. Vindication. Triumph. He wanted this. He'd planned this. Ariel's mind went blank, not from shock, but from the sheer enormity of what he'd just done. Her body wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to cover herself, to flee, to disappear into the service corridors and never look back. But her legs wouldn't move. Maybe it was the baby. Maybe it was the months of humiliation finally reaching a breaking point. Maybe it was the way Harper Sinclair, Mason's bride, radiant in her $40,000 Vera Wang gown, stood frozen at the altar, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror that looked genuine. Or maybe it was the way Mason's smirk widened when he saw her standing there trembling. He thought he'd broken her. The ballroom held its breath. Guests exchanged horrified glances. A woman in the front row whispered something to her husband. A man near the bar set down his whiskey glass so hard it cracked. Somewhere in the crowd, someone was definitely recording. Ariel's hands moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't try to cover her belly. She didn't pull the torn fabric closed. Instead, she gripped the edges of the tear, holding them open wider, and lifted her chin. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than Mason's had been. But in the silence of that ballroom, it carried like thunder. "You're right, Mason. I should have known my place." He blinked. The smirk faltered. She took one step forward, then another. Her server's shoes squeaked against the polished marble floor. "I should have known that the man I supported, the man I worked overtime for, the man I believed in when nobody else did, would throw me away the second I became inconvenient." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher. "I should have known that telling you I was pregnant would make you offer me money to handle the problem. That you'd file for divorce so fast I didn't even have time to find a lawyer. That you'd cut me off financially, refuse to answer my calls, and pretend I never existed." Harper's hand dropped from her mouth. She turned slowly toward Mason, her expression shifting from horror to something else. Confusion, realization. "Ariel," Mason started, his voice tight. "I should have known," Ariel continued, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face, "that you'd invite me to your wedding. Not as a guest, not even as a human being, but as hired help. So you could humiliate me one more time. So you could prove to everyone here that you won." She took another step. She was close enough now to see the vein pulsing in his temple. Close enough to smell his expensive cologne, the same scent that used to make her feel safe. "But here's what I know now, Mason Caldwell." Her voice dropped, but somehow it filled the room. "Ripping my dress doesn't make you powerful. It makes you exactly what you are. A coward who destroys people because he's terrified they'll tell the truth about him." The murmur grew louder. Heads turned. A man in the back row stood up. Mason's face went from flushed to pale. His hand dropped from the torn fabric. For the first time since she'd known him, through the struggling years, the rise, the marriage, the betrayal, Ariel saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. "Security," he started. "Let her speak," someone shouted from the crowd. A woman's voice, strong, angry. Harper stepped down from the altar. Her dress rustled like a ghost moving through the space. She stopped beside Ariel, close but not touching. "Is this true?" Harper's voice was barely a whisper. Is that baby his?" Ariel turned to look at her. Up close, Harper Sinclair was even more beautiful. Porcelain skin, perfectly applied makeup, eyes that held an innocence Ariel recognized. She'd once had that innocence too, before Mason taught her what men like him were capable of. "Yes," Ariel said softly. "I'm 4 months pregnant with his child, and he's pretended I don't exist since the day I told him." Harper's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Mason, her husband of approximately 10 minutes, and something in her expression hardened. "Is this true?" Harper asked him. Mason's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The great communicator, the keynote speaker, the man who could charm investors out of millions with a single pitch, had no words. "Harper, I can explain. Is this true?" The ballroom waited. And in that moment, Ariel Johnson realized something that would change everything. She wasn't the only one Mason Caldwell had underestimated. 7 years earlier, Ariel Johnson had walked into a coffee shop in Lincoln Park and changed her life forever. She hadn't planned to meet anyone. She'd just finished a brutal 14-hour day at a small marketing firm where she was the youngest strategist and worked twice as hard as everyone else to prove she belonged. Her feet ached. Her eyes burned from staring at screens. All she wanted was a large, dark roast and maybe one of those overpriced croissants that tasted like butter and regret. Mason Caldwell was sitting alone at a corner table, surrounded by a laptop, 3 empty coffee cups, and what looked like the scattered remains of someone's sanity. His hoodie had a hole in the sleeve. His hair stuck up in directions that suggested he'd forgotten what a comb was. And he was talking to himself, actually arguing with his computer screen like it might argue back. "That's not how recursion works, you absolute idiot." "Talking to yourself is the first sign of genius," Ariel had said, sliding into the chair across from him without invitation. "Or a mental breakdown. I haven't decided which yet." He'd looked up, startled, then smiled. It was the kind of smile that made something in her chest do a stupid little flip. "Definitely breakdown," he'd said. "Want to watch?" They'd talked for 4 hours, about code and campaigns, about dreams that felt too big, about Chicago winters and terrible bosses, and the specific kind of exhaustion that came from building something nobody else believed in yet. When the coffee shop closed, they'd moved to a 24-hour diner. When the diner's cook went home at 6 a.m., they'd walked along Lake Michigan and watched the sun come up over water that looked like melted gold. Mason told her about the app he was building, something about connecting small businesses with micro-investors, about democratizing startup funding, about changing the way America did business. His eyes lit up when he talked about it. His hands moved in excited gestures. He believed so completely in what he was creating that Ariel found herself believing too. "Nobody thinks it'll work," he'd admitted, as they sat on a bench near Navy Pier. "My family thinks I'm wasting my MBA. My friends think I should get a real job. Even my roommate keeps leaving job listings on my pillow." "What do you think?" Ariel had asked. He'd looked at her with those dark eyes that would later look at her with such coldness and said, "I think if I don't try, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." 6 months later, they were dating. 1 year later, Ariel had taken a second job, freelancing on weekends, so Mason could quit his soul-crushing position at a consulting firm and code full-time. She brought him groceries, made sure he ate something besides ramen and Red Bull, listened to his pitches, and helped him refine his messaging. "You're saving my life," he'd told her one night, pulling her close in the tiny apartment he shared with 2 other guys. "When this works, and it's going to work, I'm giving you everything. The best life, the best future, everything." She'd believed him. They got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. 30 people. Ariel wore a simple dress from Nordstrom Rack. Mason's suit was borrowed. The reception was potluck. They couldn't afford a honeymoon, so they spent 3 days in a cabin in Wisconsin, swimming in a lake and eating gas station sandwiches and making love like they were the only 2 people in the world. "This is perfect," Mason had whispered, holding her under stars so bright they looked fake. "You and me, that's all I need." Then everything changed. A venture capital firm in San Francisco took interest. Meetings happened. Contracts got signed. Suddenly, Mason Caldwell wasn't just a guy with an app. He was the founder of Caldwell Innovations, with a $10 million Series A funding round and an office in the West Loop. The money came fast, the fame came faster. Forbes called him a tech darling. TechCrunch wrote glowing profiles. Investors fought for meetings. Mason moved them into a penthouse, bought a Tesla, started wearing designer suits and attending galas where Ariel felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. But more than his wardrobe changed, Mason changed. The man who used to code in hoodies and talk to his laptop started speaking differently, sharper, colder, more calculated. The man who used to hold her hand during long walks now checked his phone during dinner. The man who said you and me started saying I closed a deal with Microsoft. I'm speaking at a conference in Austin. I might need to go to New York for a few weeks. Ariel tried to keep up. She attended the events, smiled at the investors, laughed at jokes she didn't understand from people who looked through her like glass. She supported him the way she always had, even as the distance between them grew wider than Lake Michigan. Their 5th anniversary, he forgot. He was in Dubai for meetings. Their 6th, he sent flowers with a card signed by his assistant. By year 7, they barely spoke. Mason worked 16-hour days, traveled constantly. When he was home, he was on calls, in meetings, planning the next acquisition or expansion. Ariel woke up alone, ate dinner alone, fell asleep alone while her husband was in their home office, building an empire that had no room for her. I miss you, she'd said one night, standing in the doorway of his office. I'm right here, he'd replied, without looking up from his screen. No, she'd whispered. You're not. 3 months later, she'd taken a pregnancy test in the bathroom of their $20 million penthouse while Mason was on a call with Tokyo investors. 2 pink lines. She'd stared at them for 10 minutes, her hands shaking, trying to decide if she felt joy or terror. She'd imagined telling him. Imagined his face lighting up the way it used to. Imagined them building something together again. Not a company, but a family. She'd been so naive. Ariel had planned the perfect moment to tell him. She'd made his favorite dinner. Pan-seared salmon with roasted asparagus. The meal she used to make in their early days when celebration meant cooking something that didn't come from a microwave. She'd bought a small gift box and placed the positive pregnancy test inside, wrapped in tissue paper the color of sunshine. She'd even worn the dress he'd once said made her look like starlight. Mason came home at 10:47 p.m., 3 hours later than promised. Sorry, babe. Investors ran long. He kissed her cheek without really looking at her, the kind of kiss that had become muscle memory rather than affection. I already ate. There was catering. The salmon had gone cold, the asparagus had turned grey, but Ariel's hope hadn't died yet. I need to talk to you about something, she'd said, following him toward their bedroom. Something important. Can it wait? I have a 7 a.m. call with Singapore. I'm pregnant. The words stopped him mid-step. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. For 5 seconds that felt like 5 years, he just stared at her. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A sharp, bitter sound that made her stomach drop. You're joking. No. Mason, How far along? 6 weeks. I took 3 tests. They're all... Jesus Christ, Ariel. He dragged his hand down his face. Jesus Christ. That's when she knew. Before he said another word, before the conversation spiraled into the nightmare it became, she knew that the man standing in front of her, this billionaire in Tom Ford suits who smelled like expensive cologne and other people's ambition, wasn't going to celebrate, wasn't going to hold her, wasn't going to be the partner she needed. This is the worst possible timing, he said, pacing their bedroom like a caged animal. We're in the middle of the biggest acquisition of my career. I'm negotiating with 3 different firms. The press is watching everything I do. My image, our image, it matters, Ariel. Do you understand that? Our baby matters more. We can't have a baby right now. He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was declining a meeting invitation. It's not feasible. The word hung in the air between them. Feasible. As if their child was a business proposition, a line item in a budget that didn't balance. I'm not asking for permission, Mason. I'm telling you I'm pregnant. This is happening. His jaw tightened. There are options. Options? Medical solutions. It's early enough that... Are you actually suggesting I get an abortion because it's inconvenient for your brand? I'm suggesting, he said, his voice dropping into that cold, measured tone he used with incompetent employees, that we think strategically about our future. I'll cover all the costs, medical, recovery, whatever you need. We can try again in a few years when things are more stable. Ariel felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, but something deeper, the foundation of who she thought he was, who she thought they were. I'm keeping this baby, she whispered. Mason's expression hardened. Then you're doing it alone. The divorce papers arrived 6 days later, hand-delivered by a lawyer who apologized for the intrusion and left a leather portfolio on their kitchen counter like he was dropping off dry cleaning. Mason filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. His legal team moved with surgical precision. They froze their joint accounts, filed restraining orders claiming Ariel was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to Mr. Caldwell's reputation. They painted her as an opportunist, a gold digger, someone who'd trapped a brilliant man with a pregnancy to secure her financial future. The media ate it up. Tech titan Mason Caldwell files for divorce amid wife's alleged manipulation. Sources close to Caldwell say estranged wife refused mental health treatment. Is Ariel Caldwell the real villain in Chicago's messiest split? They never used her maiden name, never mentioned the years she'd supported him, never interviewed her, never asked for her side, never questioned why a successful marketing strategist would need to trap anyone. Mason's PR team destroyed her before she even knew she was under attack. Her best friend Dana had arrived at the penthouse with wine, tissues, and a fury that could have powered the city. That absolute bastard! Dinah seethed, reading through the divorce filing on Ariel's laptop. He's claiming you're mentally unstable. You, the woman who literally built his life while he played video games and ate your groceries. He's protected, Dee. I signed a prenup. A prenup doesn't mean he gets to lie about you. His lawyers are better than any lawyer I could afford. Ariel's voice was hollow. And I can't fight him. Not now. Not pregnant and alone, and... Her voice cracked. I just want him to leave me alone. Then take the settlement he's offering. Ariel looked at the number on the screen. $50,000. Not monthly, not annually. Total. For 5 years of marriage. For supporting his dreams. For sacrificing her own career advancement so he could build his empire. $50,000. The cost of a mid-range sedan. He thinks I'm worth a used Honda, Ariel whispered. Dana grabbed her hand. You're worth 1,000 of him. And when this baby is born, I'm going to remind you of that every single day until you believe it. But believing it and surviving it were 2 different things. The penthouse went to Mason. The savings accounts were drained by legal fees. Ariel's credit cards, all connected to his accounts, were cancelled overnight. She moved out with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of memories that suddenly felt like evidence of her own stupidity. 3 months later, she was living in Bronzeville, working temp jobs, counting quarters, and Mason Caldwell was on the cover of Fortune magazine, being called Chicago's most eligible bachelor and a visionary unafraid to make hard choices. America loved him. Investors trusted him. The media adored him. Nobody asked about the pregnant ex-wife he'd erased. The first time Ariel went to a food pantry, she cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could force herself to walk inside. 4 months pregnant, broke, alone, standing in line with people who'd had harder lives than she'd ever known, waiting for donated canned goods and day-old bread, while her ex-husband probably ate truffle-topped something at restaurants where the wait list was 6 months long. The woman ahead of her had 3 kids clinging to her coat. The man behind her was missing 2 fingers and wore shoes held together with duct tape. Ariel felt like an imposter, like she didn't deserve to be there, like her poverty was somehow less legitimate because she'd once lived in a penthouse. But poverty didn't care about your resume. The studio apartment in Bronzeville was $950 a month, cheap for Chicago, a fortune for Ariel. It had water stains on the ceiling that looked like sad faces. The radiator worked on a schedule only it understood. The locks were so old she could probably pick them with a bobby pin. Her downstairs neighbor, Mr. Hawkins, burned something every single night around 7 p.m. Ariel still hadn't figured out what, but it smelled like regret mixed with paprika. Her furniture consisted of 1 air mattress, slowly deflating, 1 folding chair from Target, 1 plastic bin that served as both table and storage. Clothes hung on a tension rod in the bathroom because the closet door was broken. She'd applied to 347 jobs in 3 months. She'd counted. Marketing positions told her she was overqualified. Entry-level positions said she didn't have recent relevant experience. Retail and service jobs took 1 look at her growing belly and said they'd be in touch, which was code for, we can't legally discriminate, but we're absolutely discriminating. Her phone bill was overdue. Her electric bill was 1 week from disconnection, and her OB/GYN appointment, the one she desperately needed because the baby had been moving less than usual, cost $200 she didn't have. Dana had offered money, repeatedly. But Dana was a social worker who made $42,000 a year and had student loans that would outlive them both. Ariel couldn't take money from the only person who'd stayed when everyone else disappeared. The late rent notice appeared on her door on a Tuesday. Bright orange paper. Impossible to miss. Final notice. Pay within 5 days or face eviction proceedings. Ariel had stood in her doorway, staring at those words until they blurred. Where would she go? Shelters were full. She had no family in Chicago, no savings, no options. That night, she sat on her deflating air mattress and searched plasma donation centers near me on her phone. They paid $50 per donation. She'd need to donate 9 times to make rent. Could pregnant women even donate plasma? She wasn't sure, but she'd find out. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had her number memorized by now. Hello? Is this Ariel Johnson? Woman's voice. Professional. Tired. Yes? This is Melissa from Premier Staffing Solutions. You applied with us back in August for temporary event positions. August. A lifetime ago. Back when she'd still thought temp agencies might actually call. Yes, I did. I have an urgent request for staff for a wedding this Saturday night at the Drake Hotel. High-end event. We need servers who can be professional, discreet, and punctual. It's 8 hours of work, $450 cash at the end of the night. Ariel's heart stopped. $450. Almost half her rent. I can do that. Perfect. The event is black tie, but we provide uniforms. You'll need to arrive at the service entrance at 4 p.m. for orientation. I'm texting you the details now. Thank you. Thank you so much. One more thing. The client specifically requested staff with no social media presence at this event. It's a privacy thing for the guests. You'll need to leave your phone in your locker during the event. Is that okay? Absolutely. The text came through. Ariel opened it with shaking hands. Drake Hotel, Grand Ballroom, Caldwell Sinclair Wedding. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a crack that probably meant her already damaged screen was now worse. Caldwell Sinclair. Mason was getting married, and she was being hired to serve drinks at his wedding. Dana came over an hour later, let herself in with the spare key Ariel had given her for emergencies. She found Ariel sitting on the air mattress staring at the wall. "Hey, you okay? You didn't answer my texts. He's getting married." "Who?" Dana's face changed. "No. Saturday, the Drake Hotel. $2 million wedding, if the Google search I did is accurate. Ariel. And I'm working it, as staff, serving champagne to people who probably spend more on their shoes than I make in a month." "You can't go." Dana sat beside her. "You can't do that to yourself. I need the money, Dee. My rent is due. I can't donate plasma because I'm pregnant. I can't ask you for money again. I can't." Her voice broke. "I don't have choices anymore. Rich people have choices. I have survival. There has to be another way." "There isn't. I checked. I've applied everywhere. This is $450, in cash, tonight. It's going to destroy you. I'm already destroyed." Ariel looked at her friend. "At least this way I'll have rent money when it's done." Saturday arrived too quickly. Ariel stood in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom trying to make herself presentable. The uniform the agency provided was red, polyester, cheap, designed to fade into the background of luxury. It barely fit over her belly. She'd had to leave the top button undone and pray nobody noticed. Her reflection looked like a stranger. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a simple bun. No makeup. She'd sold most of it when times got desperate. She looked tired. Defeated. Like exactly what she was. Someone who'd lost everything and was still losing. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. 8 hours. $450. Then you never have to see him again. The lie tasted bitter, but she picked up her bus pass and headed for the Drake Hotel anyway, because survival didn't care about dignity. The Drake Hotel stood on North Michigan Avenue like a monument to wealth, all gold trim and marble columns and doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than Ariel's rent. She'd been here before, back in her old life. Mason had brought her to the Coq d'Or for anniversary drinks once. She'd worn a black dress and felt sophisticated. Now she wore a red polyester uniform and entered through the service entrance where a security guard barely glanced at her ID. "Staff orientation, grand ballroom level. Take the service elevator." The service elevator was nothing like the guest elevators. No mirrors, no soft music, just industrial walls covered in scratches and what looked like ancient coffee stains. 3 other women in red uniforms stood silently, not making eye contact. Ariel recognized the expression on their faces, the blank, neutral look of people who'd learned to become invisible. The service corridor beneath the grand ballroom buzzed with controlled chaos. 50 people in matching uniforms rushed between stations, carrying trays, adjusting ties, receiving last-minute instructions from supervisors with headsets. "New staff over here." A thin man with silver hair and a clipboard waved them over. His name tag read, Miles Rivera, Event Coordinator. "Welcome to what will either be the smoothest or most disastrous night of your lives. I'm hoping for smooth. You're hoping for tips. Let's make it happen." He distributed assignments quickly. Ariel was assigned to champagne service, walking the room, keeping glasses full, being professionally invisible. "Rules are simple," Miles continued. His voice rapid-fire, efficient. Guests are here for the celebration, not to chat with staff. No photos, no autographs, no conversations beyond champagne, and you're welcome. Some of these people are very famous. Some are very rich. All of them expect perfection. Give them that, and you'll get good tips. Disappoint them, and you'll never work an event in this city again. Questions? A young woman raised her hand. Who's getting married? Miles's expression shifted, just slightly, but Ariel caught it. Something between annoyance and exhaustion. Mason Caldwell and Harper Sinclair. Tech royalty meets old Chicago money. The press is calling it the wedding of the year. I'm calling it my last event before retirement. Let's go make some people happy. The name landed like a punch Ariel had been expecting but still wasn't ready for. The service entrance to the grand ballroom opened into a space that looked like heaven had taken physical form. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from ceilings painted with clouds and cherubs. White roses, thousands of them, covered every surface. Candles flickered in gold holders. The chairs were covered in white silk with gold ribbons. Each table setting probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. 200 guests filled the space, dressed like they'd stepped out of magazines. Designers Ariel recognized from Fashion Week, jewelry that required insurance policies. Conversations conducted in the tone of people who'd never worried about rent. And at the front, beneath an arch made entirely of white orchids, stood Mason Caldwell. He looked exactly like his recent magazine covers. Sharp jawline, perfect hair, designer tuxedo that probably cost 5 figures. Confident, successful, untouchable. Next to him stood Harper Sinclair, and even Ariel, who had every reason to hate this woman, had to admit she was breathtaking. Her wedding dress was art, Vera Wang definitely, with lace sleeves and a train that seemed to float. Her dark hair was styled in perfect waves. Her smile was genuine, nervous, excited. She looked like a woman who'd never been lied to. Ariel felt sick. "Champagne station, move!" a supervisor hissed at her. She loaded her tray, 12 crystal flutes, each one probably worth more than her security deposit, and stepped into the ballroom. Being invisible was harder than she'd expected, not because guests noticed her, they didn't, but because she noticed everything. The way Mason's mother sat in the front row wearing diamonds that could have funded a small country, the way his business partners laughed too loudly at mediocre jokes, the way everyone seemed to glow with the specific confidence that came from never having to check a bank balance. She moved through the crowd mechanically. Champagne? Smile. You're welcome. Move on. For 2 hours it worked. She was nobody, invisible, just another woman in a red uniform keeping the glasses full. Then Mason saw her. She was refilling a tray at the service station when she felt it, that specific prickle of being watched. She turned and found him standing 15 feet away, near the bar, staring directly at her. His expression didn't change. No surprise. No anger. No guilt. Just a slight smirk that said, "I knew you'd be desperate enough to come." He'd known. The privacy request, the no-phones policy, the specific staffing agency. He'd orchestrated this, brought her here deliberately, to prove something, to remind her of exactly where she stood in his world now. Ariel's hands shook as she lifted the tray. Mason walked toward her. Guests parted automatically, the way crowds always parted for money and power. Ariel. He said her name like he was identifying an old piece of furniture. "I was wondering if you'd actually show up." She said nothing. Her throat had closed. "How are you?" His tone was conversational, pleasant. Anyone watching would think he was making polite small talk with the help. "I heard you're doing, well, surviving. That's something." "Mason, the uniform suits you. Red was always your color." He smiled. That same smile that used to make her heart race. You should get back to work. Guests are waiting. And we wouldn't want you to lose this job too, would we? He walked away before she could respond. Behind her, Miles Rivera appeared at her elbow. You okay? His voice was quiet, concerned. Do you know him? No, Ariel whispered. I don't know him at all. Miles looked like he wanted to say something else, but a supervisor called him away. Ariel returned to serving champagne with hands that wouldn't stop trembling and a heart that felt like it was cracking down the middle. She'd survived 4 months of poverty, humiliation, rejection, loneliness. But she wasn't sure she'd survive this night. The ceremony was perfect. Of course it was. Harper Sinclair walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing something classical and expensive. Mason stood at the altar looking like every woman's dream, handsome, successful, emotional at all the right moments. His vows were beautiful, Harper's were heartfelt. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. Ariel stood in the back, holding an empty tray, watching the man who'd destroyed her life promise forever to someone else. She should have felt anger, jealousy, something hot and violent. Instead, she felt hollow. The reception began immediately after. Dinner service, speeches. The first dance to a song Ariel recognized. The same song she and Mason had danced to at their small, cheap, beautiful wedding 7 years ago. He'd repurposed their song, given it to someone else. Like everything about their life together was just material to be reused. Staff break in 10 minutes, a supervisor announced. 15-minute rotation. Don't be late. Ariel needed air, needed space, needed to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like roses and betrayal. She slipped out through a side door into a service hallway, one of those anonymous corridors that existed in every luxury hotel, where the mechanics of perfection happened away from guests' eyes. The walls were plain white, the floors were concrete, the fluorescent lights hummed with a frequency that made her head hurt. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, taking unauthorized breaks. Her eyes snapped open. Mason stood at the end of the hallway, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the door to the ballroom was closed. They were alone. My break starts in 5 minutes, she said. Hating how defensive she sounded. I wanted to talk to you. He walked closer, not threatening exactly, but deliberate. Privately. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. He stopped a few feet away. Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Far enough that anyone walking by wouldn't think anything was wrong. You're here, at my wedding, serving drinks to my guests. That's a conversation starter. You hired me. You specifically requested staff from that agency. His smile was thin. I requested experienced event staff. It's not my fault you're desperate enough to take jobs serving your ex-husband. The cruelty was casual, effortless, like hurting her required no energy at all. What do you want, Mason? I want to make sure we understand each other. His voice dropped, quiet, but sharp. Tonight is important for me, for Harper's family, for my business relationships. Half the investors in that room are watching everything I do. My reputation is on the line. Your reputation, Ariel repeated flatly. Yes, my reputation, which you could damage very easily if you decided to do something stupid. Like what? Serve champagne incorrectly? Like tell anyone who I am to you? Like make a scene? Like remind people that I was married before? He stepped closer. Harper knows I was married, but her family doesn't know the details. Her father, The Richard Sinclair who owns half of Chicago's commercial real estate thinks my divorce was amicable, clean, that we simply grew apart. We didn't grow apart. You threw me away when I got pregnant. That's your version. Mason's expression hardened. My version is that you became unstable, refused treatment, and tried to trap me with a pregnancy I'd made clear I wasn't ready for. My lawyers documented everything. Your erratic behavior, your refusal to compromise, your threats. I never threatened you. That's not what my legal team says. And that's not what the media will say if you decide to create problems for me tonight. He moved even closer, invading her space. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your shift, serve drinks, smile, stay invisible. And when it's over, you're going to take your $450 and disappear back into whatever hole you're living in now. Ariel's hands clenched into fists. And if I don't, then I'll make sure every agency in Chicago knows you're unreliable, unprofessional, mentally unstable. You'll never work another event, never get another temp job. I will destroy what's left of your life so completely that you'll wish you'd never met me. I already wish that. Something flickered in his eyes. Was it guilt? Regret? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Do we understand each other? He asked. Ariel wanted to scream, wanted to grab him by his perfect tuxedo and tell him exactly what kind of monster he'd become. Wanted to walk back into that ballroom and tell Harper Sinclair to run while she still could. But she had $127 in her bank account. A baby coming in 5 months. An eviction notice that wouldn't care about justice or dignity. Yes, she whispered. We understand each other. Good. Mason adjusted his bow tie. Oh, and Ariel? Congratulations on the baby. I hope it doesn't ruin your life the way you tried to ruin mine. He walked away, back toward the ballroom, back toward his perfect wedding and perfect new wife and perfect reputation. Ariel stood alone in that fluorescent hallway, shaking so hard she had to press her back against the wall to stay upright. She didn't know that Miles Rivera had been standing around the corner, checking inventory on his tablet. She didn't know he'd heard everything. She didn't know that what Mason had just done, threatening her, cornering her, trying to silence her, was about to become the biggest mistake of his carefully constructed life. But she would find out. In exactly 47 minutes, everything would change. Because Miles Rivera had been working luxury events for 30 years, and he knew exactly what real power looked like. And it wasn't Mason Caldwell in a tuxedo making threats. It was a pregnant woman in a cheap uniform, still standing when any reasonable person would have run. He pulled out his phone and hit record, just in case. The ballroom had transformed from ceremony space to reception paradise. Dinner was served, 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last. Ariel served champagne, cleared plates, and tried to become invisible while her body screamed that it needed to sit down. Her feet were swelling. Her back ached. The baby had been doing somersaults for the past hour, probably stressed by her elevated heart rate and the fact that she hadn't eaten anything substantial since breakfast. But she couldn't stop, couldn't sit, couldn't draw attention. Mason's threat played on repeat in her head. I will destroy what's left of your life. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He'd already destroyed so much. The speeches began after dessert, tiny works of art involving chocolate and gold leaf that probably cost $40 per plate. Harper's father stood first. Richard Sinclair was exactly what Ariel expected. Silver hair, expensive watch, the kind of posture that came from generations of inherited wealth. His speech was warm, traditional, full of jokes about finally getting Harper married off. and warnings to Mason about taking care of his daughter. "I'm trusting you with the most precious thing in my world," Richard said, his hand on Mason's shoulder. "Don't make me regret it." The crowd laughed, clinked glasses. Mason smiled his practiced smile. If they only knew. Harper's sister spoke next, then Mason's business partner, then a college friend with embarrassing stories about freshman year. Each speech was polished, rehearsed, designed to reinforce the narrative that Mason Caldwell was a good man marrying a good woman in a good way. Then Miles Rivera appeared at the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried over the sound system with professional clarity, "we have one final surprise before we open the dance floor." Ariel was near the back, refilling champagne flutes at a service station. She glanced up, mildly curious. Surprise additions to the schedule weren't uncommon at luxury weddings. "Our groom has requested a special moment of recognition," Miles continued. His expression was neutral, but something in his tone made Ariel's stomach drop. "Mason, would you like to come up?" Applause. Mason stood, buttoned his jacket, walked to the microphone with the confidence of a man who'd given 100 speeches and nailed every one. "Thank you, Miles." Mason's smile was broad, charming. "I know it's traditional for the groom to thank everyone for coming, to toast to love and happiness and all that, and I will. But first I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone very important." Ariel's hands froze mid-pour. "You see, getting to this point, this perfect night, this amazing woman, this incredible life, required me to make some difficult decisions, to prioritize what matters, to remove toxic influences from my world." His eyes scanned the crowd, searching. "Success isn't just about what you build. It's about what you're willing to let go of." He found her. Their eyes locked across the ballroom. "And sometimes," Mason continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "the people who claim to love you are actually the ones holding you back. The ones who don't believe in your vision, who want to trap you into a life that's smaller than what you deserve." The crowd murmured, a few uncomfortable laughs. Harper looked confused, glancing between Mason and the audience like she was trying to understand what was happening. "So tonight, I want to publicly acknowledge that I made the right choice, that cutting toxic people out of my life, no matter how hard it was, led me here, to Harper, to happiness, to the future I always deserved." He raised his glass. "To knowing your worth, and to never settling for less than you deserve." The crowd hesitated, then raised their glasses. "To never settling," someone shouted. They drank, applauded, completely missing the cruelty underneath the pretty words. But Ariel heard it, felt it, understood exactly what he'd just done. He'd called her toxic, in front of 200 people, without naming her. A public humiliation designed to preemptively destroy her credibility if she ever tried to speak up. She stood frozen, the champagne bottle in her hand, watching him smile at the applause. And that's when he did it. Mason stepped away from the microphone, walked down from the small stage, and moved through the crowd. Guests parted. Harper called after him, confused, but he didn't stop. He walked directly toward Ariel. The room watched. Phones started coming out. Social media documentation of what was supposed to be a touching moment. Mason stopped in front of her, up close. His smile was pure venom. "I want to personally thank our staff tonight," he announced, his voice loud enough to carry. "Especially our servers, who work so hard to make nights like this perfect." He reached out, not to shake her hand, not to pat her shoulder, but to grab the fabric of her uniform right over her pregnant belly. "Some people," he said, his voice dropping just slightly, "will do anything for money." Then he pulled. The cheap polyester tore easily. That sickening rape sound echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. Ariel's belly was exposed. Not fully, but enough. Enough that the white camisole beneath showed. Enough that her pregnancy was undeniable. Enough that every single person in that ballroom understood exactly what they were witnessing. Gasps. Phones raised higher. Harper's hand flew to her mouth. Richard Sinclair stood up. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. Mason stepped back, his hand still holding the torn fabric, his expression triumphant. Like he'd just won something, proven something. "Know your place," he whispered, quiet enough that only Ariel could hear. The ballroom held its breath, and Ariel Johnson, 4 months pregnant, humiliated in front of 200 of Chicago's elite, standing in a torn uniform with her belly exposed and her dignity shredded, did not run. Time moved strangely, like honey, like swimming through concrete. Like every second stretched into an hour and the entire ballroom existed in a photograph that would haunt the internet forever. Ariel's mind went blank. Not from shock, but from a clarity so absolute it felt like violence. She saw everything. The horror on Harper's face. The disgust on her father's face. The way Mason's business partners looked away, embarrassed for him. The way phones tilted higher, recording, documenting, capturing the moment a billionaire publicly humiliated a pregnant woman for sport. Her hands moved slowly. She didn't try to cover her belly. She didn't pull the fabric closed. Instead, she gripped the torn edges and held them wider, making sure everyone saw. "You're right, Mason." Her voice came out quieter than his, but in the absolute silence of that ballroom, it carried like thunder. "I should have known my place." He blinked. The triumph faltered. She took 1 step forward. Her server's shoes squeaked against marble. The sound was somehow obscene in the silence. "I should have known that the man I supported, the man I worked overtime for when he couldn't pay rent, the man I believed in when nobody else did, would throw me away the second I became inconvenient." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher. "I should have known that telling you I was pregnant would make you offer me money to handle the problem. That you'd file for divorce so fast I didn't have time to pack. That you'd freeze our accounts, hire lawyers to call me mentally unstable, and cut me off completely." Harper's hand dropped from her mouth. She turned slowly toward Mason, her wedding dress rustling like a ghost. "Ariel," Mason started, his voice tight with warning. "I should have known," Ariel continued, her voice cracking but steady, "that you'd invite me to your wedding, not as a guest, not even as a human being, but as hired help, so you could humiliate me one more time, so you could prove to everyone here that you won." She took another step, close enough to see the vein pulsing in his temple, close enough to smell his cologne. "But here's what I know now." Her voice dropped, but somehow it filled the grand ballroom. "Ripping my dress doesn't make you powerful. It makes you exactly what you are, a coward who destroys people because he's terrified they'll tell the truth about him." The murmur grew louder. A woman in the front row stood up. Then another. A man near the bar set down his drink. "Security." Mason reached for someone, anyone. "Let her speak." A woman's voice from the crowd. Strong. Furious. "I want to hear this." Another voice. Male. Disgusted. Mason's face went from flushed to pale. Harper stepped down from the head table, her Vera Wang dress trailing behind her like a river. She stopped beside Ariel. Not touching, but close. "Is this true?" Harper's voice trembled. Is that his baby? Ariel turned to look at her. Up close, Harper's makeup couldn't quite hide the tears forming. Her hands shook as they gripped her bouquet. Yes, Ariel said softly. I'm 4 months pregnant with his child. We were married for 5 years. I supported him through the early days of his company. And when I told him I was pregnant, he called me a liability and filed for divorce. Harper's eyes filled. She looked at Mason, her husband of maybe an hour, and Ariel saw something break in her expression. Is this true? Harper asked him. Harper, I can explain. Is this true? The ballroom waited. Mason's mouth opened, closed. For the first time in years, he had no speech prepared, no talking points, no clever spin. She's exaggerating. I have the divorce papers, Ariel said quietly. The texts where you called our baby a problem to handle. The bank statements showing you cut me off. The legal documents where your lawyers called me mentally unstable for refusing an abortion. That's private. Nothing's private when you rip someone's dress off in public. Then Miles Rivera stepped forward. The event coordinator had been standing near the stage, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. Now he walked to the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd been dealing with wealthy people's nonsense for 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Miles's voice was professional, calm. I need to share something. About 20 minutes ago, I overheard a conversation in the service hallway. Mason's face went white. I heard Mr. Caldwell threaten Miss Johnson. He told her that if she said anything tonight, if she embarrassed him in any way, he would destroy what was left of her life. He called her mentally unstable. Threatened to blacklist her from every job in Chicago. Made it clear she was here to be humiliated. Miles pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. Mason's voice filled the ballroom. You're going to take your $450 and disappear back into whatever hole you're living in now. Gasps. Someone swore. I will destroy what's left of your life so completely that you'll wish you'd never met me. Harper stepped away from Mason like he was radioactive. Congratulations on the baby. I hope it doesn't ruin your life the way you tried to ruin mine. The recording stopped. The ballroom exploded. Guests stood, shouted. Richard Sinclair charged toward Mason with murder in his eyes. Business partners backed away like Mason had a contagious disease. Someone started a slow clap that turned into applause for Ariel. Harper pulled off her wedding ring, a rock the size of a marble, and threw it at Mason's chest. We're done, she said, her voice breaking, before we even started. Then she turned to Ariel, took off her veil, placed it gently in Ariel's hands. I'm sorry, Harper whispered. I'm so sorry. She walked out of her own wedding, her dress trailing behind her, her father following. Half the ballroom followed them. Mason stood alone in his tuxedo, surrounded by abandoned tables and broken crystal and the smoldering ruins of his perfect image. Ariel looked at him one last time. Know your place, she said softly. Then she walked out too. The video went viral before Ariel even made it home. Someone, probably multiple someones, had posted footage of the dress-ripping moment within minutes. By the time Ariel collapsed onto her deflating air mattress at 2 a.m., @Caldwell wedding was trending on Twitter. TikTok had the audio clip of Miles's recording. Instagram was full of side-by-side comparisons of Mason's Forbes covers with screenshots of him ripping Ariel's dress. Tech titan's wedding implodes after he attacks. Pregnant ex-wife. Mason Caldwell caught threatening woman on audio recording. Harper Sinclair walks out of wedding after groom's shocking behavior. Is this the end of the Midwest golden boy? Ariel read them all through tears that wouldn't stop coming. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief. Validation. The bone-deep exhaustion of finally being believed. Her phone rang. Dana. Are you okay? Don't answer that. Obviously you're not okay. I'm coming over. D. It's 2 a.m. I said I'm coming over. Dana arrived 20 minutes later with Thai food, tissues, and a fury that could have powered the city. That absolute bastard, Dana kept repeating as she watched the videos on Ariel's cracked phone screen. That absolute monster. He ripped your dress, in public, while you're pregnant. Who does that? Someone who thinks he's untouchable, Ariel said quietly. Was untouchable. Dana showed her another headline. His board is calling an emergency meeting. 3 investors have publicly withdrawn funding. Harper's father is threatening legal action. Mason's PR team released a statement calling the video taken out of context, and people are destroying them in the comments. Ariel stared at the screen, at Mason's face in the photos, at the comments below, thousands of them, from people all over the world saying the things she'd needed to hear for 6 months. This is abuse. How was she supposed to survive? He needs to pay child support. Someone get this woman a lawyer. Someone did. The email arrived at 6 a.m. from a law firm Ariel recognized. One of those places where partners billed $800 an hour and the waiting room probably had original art. Ms. Johnson, we watched the video from last night's wedding. We'd like to represent you pro bono in pursuing child support and damages from Mr. Caldwell. Please call us at your earliest convenience. Then another email, from a women's advocacy group. Then another, from a journalist who wanted to interview her. Then another, and another, and another. By noon, Ariel had 17 offers for legal representation, 43 interview requests, and a GoFundMe someone had started without her permission that had raised $47,000. People want to help you, Dana said, reading through the emails with her. The internet saw what he did. They're furious. The legal case moved faster than Ariel thought possible. Mason's lawyers tried to fight, but the video evidence was irrefutable. The audio recording was damning. Public pressure was enormous. 3 months after the wedding, a judge ordered Mason to pay $15,000 monthly child support, cover all medical expenses, and contribute $500,000 to a trust fund for the baby. He was also ordered to attend co-parenting classes and prohibited from making any public statements about Ariel. Ariel moved out of Bronzeville into a 2-bedroom apartment in Hyde Park with heating that worked and windows that didn't rattle. She bought an actual bed. Started eating 3 meals a day, could finally afford her ob-gyn appointments, but the money wasn't what changed her. It was the messages. Hundreds of them, then thousands. From women who'd experienced similar betrayals, who'd been cut off by wealthy ex-partners, who'd struggled to survive while pregnant, who'd been told they were crazy, unstable gold diggers. Thank you for speaking up. You gave me courage to leave. I thought I was alone. One message came from Harper Sinclair. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry you had to go through that alone. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. They met for coffee 2 weeks later. Harper looked different without the wedding makeup. Younger, more fragile, more real. I called off the marriage, Harper said quietly. Obviously. My father wanted to sue him into bankruptcy. I'm sorry your wedding turned into— Don't. Harper's voice was firm. Don't apologize for his actions. What he did to you, what he did to both of us. That's not something you need to apologize for. They talked for 3 hours, about Mason, about warning signs they'd missed, about rebuilding. What are you going to do now? Harper asked. Ariel had been thinking about that question for weeks. I want to help other women, she said slowly. Women in situations like I was in, who need legal support, financial resources, emergency housing, who are being erased by powerful men who think they can just disappear people. That's a good idea, Harper said. A really good idea. I don't know how to start something like that. I do. Harper pulled out her phone. My mother runs a non-profit foundation. I can make introductions. Get you connected with people who know how to build this. 6 months later, Ariel Johnson stood in a small office space in downtown Chicago, cutting the ribbon on the Phoenix Rising Center, a resource hub for women escaping financial abuse, offering legal aid, emergency funds, job training, and housing assistance. The name came from something Dana had said. You literally rose from the ashes of what he tried to destroy. Ariel's daughter, Eliza Rose Johnson, was born on a Tuesday in April, weighing 7 pounds and 3 ounces, with a cry that sounded like victory. Mason requested supervised visitation. The court agreed. He showed up late to the first appointment, stayed 20 minutes, and never came back. His company lost 40% of its value. 3 board members resigned. His reputation never recovered. Meanwhile, Ariel Johnson, former trophy wife, discarded ex, pregnant woman in a torn dress, built something that would outlast any billionaire's empire. She built hope.